Hey there, everybody. My name is Snitch, and welcome back to another episode of CO Select. First of all, I want to shout out to everybody who commented, either on the YouTube channel itself, on Discords, a few places. A lot of people said they appreciated the content, and it was just my first video. I kind of went rogue with it. I'm just kind of doing what I feel, and I'm really glad that you guys seem to like what I'm putting out. Like I said, I'm hoping to put out 3 or 4 videos a week on this channel, mainly just of Advanced Wars by Web replays by now. But as the reboot comes out, I'll hopefully get into more live games maybe. So I think it's kind of an interesting different skill set as compared to like the asynchronous style that Advanced Wars by Web currently has. But yeah, I want to get into some kind of like live games, get into some practice for the hopeful reboot multiplayer that will be coming. We're all praying for a solid multiplayer system, and we can just hope that they end up delivering in that regard. Anyway, let's get into today's game. Today's match is against QQQQ. I don't really know what they prefer to go by. I speak to them a fair amount on the Advanced Wars by Web Discord, which you guys should check out if you're interested in getting more involved in the community. Either way, we play each other all the time. We have very similar elo ranges. We're both, in that 900 to 1000 range on the ladder. Queue into them. Literally, I think we finish a game almost every day. Like, it's kind of insane how many games we play. Today's game is a tier 1 match from Wharf to Wilds. We're actually playing a Von Bolt mirror. Von Bolt has a day-to-day where both his units gain both 10% attack and 10% defense. This is obviously very, very strong. Defense especially is a very, very important statistic in a turn-based strategy game like this, because it means that it's much harder for the enemy units to attack you and get dominant trades. However, obviously in the Von Bolt mirror, we kind of end up negating that aspect about each other, so it kind of ends up just being like a base game. But I'm sure there are, some instances where, the damage modifiers between the additional defense and, like, terrain probably do make a slight difference. But either way, it's a little bit closer to, like, a normal game as opposed to Von Bolt against something like Hawk or something like Sasha, where he has just a strict stat advantage throughout the entire game. From Wharf to Wilds, pretty simple map. Kind of an interesting capture phase on this map. None of the properties are particularly close. You kind of have to make interesting decisions with regards to what you want to prioritize and your movements efficiency wise. Like there's no real chains on this map. They're kind of all spread out, and additionally your bases aren't even within any range of a city at all. The only property that's close to your base is a comm tower, and as we discussed before, you don't really want to go for comm towers early game. You want to try and save capturing them for basically the turn you want to start doing damage, because that's when you're getting value out of the 10% firepower boost. There is an airport on this map. There's also a port here, but it's, well, you can pick up, grab a battleship. Probably not a standard situation within Standard League. But yeah, there is an airport, so air combat is a little bit involved. A few fronts here, mainly separated by these pipes. Traditionally, there's a lot of fighting over the center on this map, as there is with most maps. But you can see some stuff down the sides. Normally it's air dominated due to the fact the airports are quite far away from each other. It can be quite hard to get battlecopters to mirror your opponents, so you'll normally end up having to build anti-air to like hold them off, or battlecopters will just pick up your units, pick up your infantry all along the sides, and you kind of end up losing control. So this is quite an interesting game, I think. It basically came down to a lot of that side front play, and I think I had a lot of smart pivots this game with kind of how I moved my army, and QQQQ was not quite able to keep up with kind of what I was up to. So let's just get straight into the replay analysis. So day 1, pretty standard, double infantry build, obviously. Going into my turn, just going to be the same thing, moving my infantry out. I go over for these properties first, mainly because I want to kind of get to this area as soon as possible. When I look at kind of the map here, obviously you can go for this left city first with this initial infantry, my first set of advantage infantry. But I'm kind of thinking, when you think about where you want your infantry to move straight away, you should always be thinking about not what you want them to do first, but also what you want them to do next. So kind of here I'm thinking like, I could go for this property, but where is my infantry going after this? Just kind of towards the center, right? There's like 2 cities here that I want to contest, and obviously it's important to capture the center properties, but I'm not in like any extreme rush, whereas this area, there's like 7 properties basically that are kind of mine, quote unquote, that I need to end up picking up at some point. So I'd rather, move my infantry into this area and just start tackling at this area straight away, because this is kind of where the bounty of property is, right? There's like 3 here in the middle that I could go for, but generally I want, you want more infantry on the side where there's more properties. So I'm pushing over towards this right side first. Double infantry build, very standard. Day 2, he's gonna be moving out here. Oh, they. I keep saying he. I wouldn't be saying they, but yeah, I'll get into it as I get more used to this. But yeah, they end up moving out. You know, kind of keeping me guessing. I guess this is kind of a smarter move than my move because mine kind of declares that I'm going to the right side, so it's obvious. I think QQQ as a player. I'm just gonna keep saying QQQ because again, I don't know what they prefer to be called. But as a player, I think they have a lot of smart ideas. They normally do pretty clever setups with regards to where they place their units and kind of like the way they attack formations. I'm always pretty inspired by kind of the way they set up, just the way they kind of keep things hidden, and then they set up these like surprise plays. But even just kind of this move, while it doesn't look very different to mine, it actually has quite a big difference because this infantry is still within range of both of these properties, whereas my infantry can only go to this right property. So it's very obvious where my infantry is going, whereas this infantry is in a much more neutral position. They could go either way. Like, I would assume they'll play to the left side, kind of the way I'm playing to my right side, but just because that's kind of like your advantageous side, but you never know. Like, the infantry could go to center, and they could start pushing down the middle. It's just they're not really declaring intent, whereas I've kind of obviously declared intent, so I actually like this move a lot more. Definitely something to think about when you're kind of moving your infantry in the early game. More infantry builds, just standard early game, you know. First 6 days, traditional cap phase. I capture this city, move this infantry up, because this city's 2 towers away, rather than going to the right. The airport is 3 moves away. 2 moves away, sorry, so obviously for efficiency's sake, I go for this one. I prefer to go down here and kind of capture these bottom cities. Generally, my playstyle revolves around capturing my rear cities first and moving forwards. This means that your infantry kind of time themselves to kind of reach the front line more towards when the vehicles start clashing. You know, when the fights are like actually relevant and about properties, your infantry will be reaching the front line because they've already captured the back cities, rather than you starting by going for the central cities and then sending your next round of infantry backwards, kind of like all your units are moving together. So generally I like to prefer taking my rear properties first, just as a general idea. Obviously this infantry is going to end up walking all the way around here, so he's not going to be really going to be relevant for a very long time anyway. But, you know, it's generally something to think about, is I prefer to capture the rear properties first and then start moving forwards, just because it times your army better and you get better groups of units, I find. Another double infantry build. Very standard. Just scared to go too fast in case it breaks. QQ ends up going for this more aggressive city rather than going straight down for this one. I believe they did the same thing though. You notice they put the infantry here. I didn't mention this one, but it's the same idea where they put their infantry here, and it's the same thing where it could go to this city or it could go back and capture the rear cities. It's just the same thing. It's kind of hiding intent. I think it's just it's a much better way to play the game, and it's much smarter because it's just limiting the amount of information your opponent has, even when it's not super relevant. It's just, even in the early game, you know, you could be thinking about how your opponent's going to move, and you can respond with the way you move, you know, whether you mirror their captures, whether you start thinking about attacking other fronts. Just the way they always hide where their infantry are going to go. I think it's a good habit to pick up and something you should always consider. Double infantry build again. Obviously we're not in tank phase yet. Still like first 6 days. I finished capturing my properties. Start capturing 2 more. I moved this infantry up just to kind of like push for this one. I definitely could move for the airport as well, but I guess I just considered the central properties a little bit more valuable with the current map state. But honestly, I think maybe moving up is a bit of a mistake and I should play more to the right side. But maybe it doesn't matter, I'm not sure. 2 property caps. Starts capturing the rear property here. Moves this other infantry forwards. Starting to pressure some of this right side. Caps the central property. His infantry, well, their infantry matches mine, where we're even now. You know, and this could be a response to the way I played, or maybe they just thought the same way. Another double infantry build. Still not at tank money, you know, it's first 6 days, you know, we wait for day 5, day 6 to get the tanks out. I finished capturing these 2 properties, start moving my infantry to the center. I move this infantry round to get this property, so I have both my center properties already in sight. It can't be interrupted, I think, because of the way it is. I mean, I guess they could just attack, but it'd be weird. So yeah, I'm securing both my central properties fast, you know, just because I have the opening now. Start capturing this one on the left. I actually move this infantry up and go for this city over going for the airport. Obviously, they're both 2 towers away, or 2 moves away. But this city is actually quite contestable in this map. It's very easy to get an infantry. You know, this infantry is only 3 moves away. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. And then it's on this city. So it's actually quite an easy city to take if your opponent's slow to go for it. I've had experiences in the past where I lose this city pretty quickly if I don't end up securing it early. So just trying to get it, you know, in case this infantry, mainly in response to this infantry move, where, you know, because this infantry moved here, again, it's the same thing, you know, my infantry went here, and it's much more obvious that I'm going to go for this property, whereas, I mean, obviously he's already, you know, this property is already captured, but the infantry moving here is just a lot more threatening on this space, you know, I find that, you know, a lot of the moves that QQQ makes, I get quite impressed by just of how like the threat lingers, even if it's not meant to be a threat. It's just like because of the neutral positioning of the infantry, and they're always quite intelligently placed to just always have multiple locations they can pivot to, and it makes me consider a lot of options that I'm not sure about, and kind of keeps me on my toes in that regard. Build more infantry again. Only had 7k. Next turn's the tank turn. We all know it. So double property cap starts moving towards their airport. And yeah, like you see, this infantry didn't go for this attack. This could have been because of the way I put my infantry. Most likely, if I hadn't done this, if I had moved from my airport, I imagine this infantry would have moved here. So that's why I felt the need to move here, because of this infantry position, just so I didn't have any, you know, issues securing the city. Obviously, they could still maintain an aggressive attack, an attack from the mountains, but it's just a very aggressive play as opposed to just like, kind of like handshaking and trading. Some players would go for this attack, but obviously it's denying your own income a bit. Just gets a little bit messy, but it's still not necessarily a bad play, but yeah, they see I'm already in position to start capping the city, and then they move to just trade economy instead. Next infantry moves down. This one could go for the attack, but obviously it'll be one turn too late. I'll already have finished the city by then. And then first tank comes out on the right side, so I think this is actually kind of your weaker side, maybe not in the early game, but towards the mid game, you know, you obviously have a base airport here, so it's a little bit easier to reinforce this area for me than it is for them. So you know, it could be kind of standard to build the first vehicle on your weaker side to kind of maintain some early presence. Honestly, I don't think it's too much of a big deal which way it's built, but either way they choose to build over here, it's a little bit further forwards. But this base is actually kind of hard to get to the center, mainly because of all the forests here. It's actually surprisingly difficult to reinforce the center from this position with treads. So it is something to consider. My next turn here, capture my property, start capturing my 2 centrals, push for this one on the bottom left. Get ready to capture this airport, start capturing this property, got 3 digging next turn. I start capturing my comm tower as well. Obviously tanks are coming out now, so I'm pretty sure combat will be, if not the next day, then the day after. And even if it's not, I'd like to have the opportunity. It means I can threaten it. It also threatens them to capture them comm tower as well. Obviously, they're probably gonna do it anyway. They already have the infantry here, but that's another argument as well. By the way, the reason to build a tank here as well is so you have an infantry to capture the comm tower. That's another thing to consider with regards to where you're building your first vehicle. Obviously, they didn't need any more infantry here, but needing an infantry here for the comm tower is something to consider. So that's another good argument for building the tank here. But yeah, either way, I start capturing the comm tower because I'm pretty sure it's going to start being relevant. Move my next infantry into the center. Could start pushing to the right more. I'm kind of relying on these 2 infantry to capture this whole side. In hindsight, maybe it'd be better to kind of like put another infantry over here just to kind of get these properties dinging a bit faster. But instead I opt for like kind of this offensive middle pressure. I'm not sure if it will lead to much, but it's kind of just, you know, it makes my opponent nervous. I actually built my tank down here. I don't need the infantry for the comm tower. I've already got it. But again, it's a little bit regretful. I'm kind of, again, focusing on the central position, but there's definitely an argument to be made that my tank here would make more sense, because I do need more infantry on this side. In hindsight, I definitely left this side lingering very long. And you could definitely say that I should be building more infantry to this side, as opposed to kind of just relying on these 2 to capture everything. I think there's totally an argument to be made there. But I'm just kind of keep up the center pressure. Generally, winning the center is winning most maps, so you want to default to pressuring the center, and I guess that's what I kind of do here. I start capturing their comm tower, start capturing their airport. They're actually a turn ahead of me on the airport, but shouldn't be a huge deal. Normally, if you get a turn ahead on the airport, you can get the first copter out. And if you get the first copter out, it kind of puts your opponent in a weird position, because you can build a copter to counter their copter, but especially on a map like this where the airports are quite far, it's not really a direct counter. It can be quite easy to pivot around their copters. So you kind of end up having to build an anti-air sometimes when they build a copter, and it can feel a little bit awkward. So getting air online first can be pretty significant in some exchanges. Start capturing their central properties, move their tank into the center to match my imminent tank, and they build another tank here. And another infantry here, and just moving their infantry down. Don't go for the threaten on the mountains. Obviously, this infantry can't reach these locations, so not threatening my capture, but this attack will be pretty useless anyway, because I'm already on a city. finish capturing my 3 properties, start capturing my airport, finish capturing my comm tower, move my tank up into this defensive square behind my infantry, not in range of the enemy tank. Don't want to give them the first hit when I don't have any cover, but I'm likely going to build another tank here anyway, so it wouldn't really be that big a deal either way. Use my infantry just to block and have a double threat on this infantry. You know, if I get a free attack, I may as well take it. Build another tank. And yeah, I start threatening these properties. And this is what I was talking about. See, because they didn't move for this property, suddenly I actually have this capture threat here. And it's kind of annoying because obviously if I get on this city first, you're hitting me from planes and my infantry's going to win the trade, inevitably. So it's actually kind of annoying, and this is kind of what I was talking about. Where I moved here, this is just kind of from experience of playing on from Wolf to Wilds. I know that if you don't threaten to capture this city, they could just kind of come here and just walk over the mountain range and be really annoying. So I've actually got a pretty solid defensive position here, and it's mainly just because of this infantry's movement, where they're going for their top left properties, which obviously you do want to do. There's like I said, there's a bounty of properties up here, but suddenly they left this property exposed as a result. If they'd moved their infantry here, I probably maybe wouldn't have gone for this. I might have gone for the attack at this point because it's a bit later in the game, and I also have my comm tower, which makes the attack a little bit more effective than it would have been when they had the opportunity here, because obviously I'm hitting, you know, a 120 infantry on mountains into a 110 infantry on the city. So I'll actually end up with, I think it's like a 8-7 or a 7-6 or something like this. Either way, it's more likely to be a guaranteed solid trade for me, as opposed to like the earlier one. But yeah, so now I'm kind of pressuring the city, and it's just kind of annoying, I think. So they either like move their infantry back, which is kind of just wasting a turn, because then you should have just moved it here in the first place. Just feels really bad. I think just putting the infantry here is a lot of pressure. So actually the tank comes out to threaten this city. So I'm actually forcing vehicles to move instead, which is like even more annoying, I think, honestly. And they finish capturing the airport, start capturing this quarter city, move the infantry over to the left, start getting those properties, moving for these properties as well. Finish their central properties. Build another tank, build an artillery and build an infantry. I think QQQ likes the artillery a lot. I'm not a huge fan of artillery, it kind of depends on the scenario. Traditionally I save them as like a medium tank counter. I just think, I'm sure part of it is just I'm not super confident in artillery usage, but I find a lot of the times when artillery is built, I don't see it get a lot of value unless I feel like I'm misplaying into it, which does happen. But overall, I think it's very hard to use, especially one artillery effectively. When you get like 2 artillery, I think it's a lot easier, but alone artillery, I think, has a lot of problems because you're sacrificing some of the front wall you would have built. I think this turn actually, maybe they only had 7k, so I think kind of they had to go artillery if they wanted to build a vehicle, but either way, I find you're sacrificing some of the front wall you could have built, either in tanks or even infantry, to have this artillery. And if your wall is weaker and I break your wall, you know, let's say they have an artillery and 2 tanks, and I break one of the tanks and put the other one to low HP, the artillery doesn't want to sit there and hit me, right? Because it's just going to die next turn either way. So you can kind of end up like pressuring artillery out just by breaking the wall, even without actually damaging the artillery. Could be a pretty consistent occurrence. Either way, I'm going to start capturing my properties. I give up on this one because obviously I don't want to take free tank damage for no reason. Finish capturing my airport, start moving this infantry down, and just start building kind of like a central wall in the middle, moving my vehicles up. I end up moving this infantry instead into the same position. So what I'm doing here is, again, threatening the city, and it's kind of locking this tank here, or forcing their infantry to move in response. That's why I kind of didn't feel bad about the tank being the one covering the city, because suddenly there's a vehicle like locked in this spot, right? If they want to maintain the city position, and obviously they don't want to move this infantry because they want to keep capturing properties, you know, this infantry moves onto the port, this infantry moves onto the cities. It's really hurting the efficiency of these infantry if they have to come cover this property, and it's hurting this tank and the middle wall if the tank has to sit here and cover this property as well. So I moved this infantry up again because I see kind of a window where it's kind of safe, again, to threaten this property. And it all kind of stems from, you know, I took mine, so this isn't really an option, because I can always just come and defend it. It is an option, but I've already got the economy covered, so I'm not too concerned, right? Whereas, you know, this is a free city for me to come and contest. Move my other infantry up. Get a tank and another infantry. Day 8? I think it's day 7, but it's day 8, right? I'm not sure. Either way, they do end up going for the caps. Obviously the more efficient choice. Finish this top right cap. Start capping some more of these right cities. This is where they do get the same pressure as me, the same pressure point. But at this point, I already have my airport unlocked. And yeah, you see this battlecopter who's covering this city. I could do the same thing down here. But the thing is, the difference between these scenarios is I've already got this city. So it feels worse for them to be like, they're covering a neutral city right now. You know, these are multiple layers of resources invested into covering a city that isn't even generating them income. It's kind of just like potential income for me that they don't want me to have, but it's on their side, you know, so it feels pretty bad. Artillery moves down. Tank can break free because the B-copter's now covering. Double infantry build. Obviously, the B-copter's quite expensive. And yeah, just walling in the middle. I feel like a lot of my games against QQQ end up like this, so we end up with these like insane walls. We had one game. I wanted to do a replay analysis of this one, to be honest. It was the first game that it kind of inspired me to do it, but I think the replay's too old now, so I'm not sure if I can access it anymore. Because they lowered the amount of time the replays were available. But it was a coal mirror, and it was on. I think it was on Shadows Chase You Endlessly, I think the map is called. The one with the ports on either side. Oh, sorry, the airports on top and bottom on like the separate islands. Really high funding map, but we had like an insane wall brewing. It was like 8 tanks each or something. And then I found this crazy wall break that took out like 6 tanks in one turn and blew the game wide open, but the tension of that game was like insane. And it was one of my first 20-25 games. So it was just like super stressful to have this massive wall building, and neither player wanted to be the one to commit to the attack. It was a pretty funny match. I definitely wanted to cover that one, but yeah, I'm not sure I can get access to it anymore. By the way, going into day 8 of my turn, I move on to capture this port. Obviously, this infantry is threatening this capture / threatening me from moving it. I end up moving my tank here to cover this side as well. So again, it's like the same thing, but this property is generating me income, so there's kind of a little difference in that regard, where I am actually getting value from sustaining, you know, holding this property. And I'm capturing this property on the left. I move my infantry round just to kind of like reinforce this side, but still threatening this property. You know, the copter's not in range to hit this infantry, but now the copter is again locked on this property. You know, you see how I'm constantly maintaining an infantry threat of being within a move of this property that's forcing them to keep a vehicle within this range. You know, they can move the copter out, but it's gonna feel bad. I mean, I think likely the copter's gonna be targeting this left side anyway. You know, trying to pick off infantry where they can, but it's gonna, you know, let's say they want to reinforce the center with this copter, suddenly you have to kind of keep it within range of this city still. You know, you can move it like here and then it's still in range, but it's just really awkward that it's like tethered around this point. And again, this point isn't even generating any income for my opponent. It's just a point that could be generating me income, but it's not actually giving them any value, so they're just kind of defending a square that isn't really doing anything for them. Just keep reinforcing my wall in the middle here. I build an anti-air. This is what I was talking about, where because the airport came up first for my opponent, it kind of meant that I have this sudden copter threat that I kind of have to deal with, and building a copter and riding it all the way across the map isn't really a great option, so I'm kind of forced into building an anti-air, I felt, just to kind of hold this left side and keep my infantry alive, because like I said, the copter over here could just walk around picking off all this infantry if you don't build any counter option, and getting a copter over here is just a massive struggle, obviously, because of the difference between my airport and this left front. So I kind of feel forced to build an anti-air as my counter option, as opposed to building a copter of my own. So this is kind of the advantage of getting your airport online first. That happens fairly consistently, I think. You know, if one player rushes the airport, or, you know, kind of just is first, they get to the airport first, it could definitely end up with this scenario. I'd say it's pretty consistent throughout my games. Just holding my tanks in mid. I've got 4 tanks now. Do have to cover this left area with my tank currently. Again, it feels kind of bad, but it's the same thing I'm doing over here. So this is what I was talking about, where this property is very contestable, even if it doesn't necessarily look like it. And it is something to consider on this map. But again, obviously the difference is that I've already captured mine, so I am actually gaining from it. Also, I put my infantry here to capture the city, even though it's under attack threat. I think I was just pretty fine with this trade, and also my tank's pretty close, so the infantry has to hit from here. It doesn't really have any backup. I think I kind of win this one inevitably, but you know, we will end up trading damage, and obviously I'm capturing here and they're not. So it could be kind of bad for me, but I just ended up going for the capture anyway, because it's just an infantry fight. You do cap, start moving the infantry down, capture more cities. Another tank comes out in the middle. Now it's 3 tanks to 4. They have an artillery though, and a B-copter. Start moving their infantry, keep maintaining this wall. We just end up with these crazy walls. So like I said, this B-copter does move forward, it does want to reinforce the center, but it does have to keep in mind that this city is still under threat, so it kind of has to stay within range. It can't just be going like all the way over here. Build a mech over here. I think this is just like an economy buy. I generally don't like building mechs, but there is value sometimes. I think generally mechs are good in positions where they have a lot of tanks and you kind of need to defend. because mechs can't move along the map very far, especially without an APC or a T-copter or anything, so they're kind of good for like holding this position. I think this mech could be better if like I maybe had a tank over here already and I was threatening his infantry, and then, you know, to keep pushing forwards, I would have to consider a mech all the time. But I think it's mainly just an economy buy, just because they only had 5k funding. But either way, I think I would personally probably build an infantry here as opposed to building a mech. They do go for the attack on this this infantry here, delaying my capture. Kind of annoying. Finish capturing this left one, finish capturing this port. I just go for the capture here as well. I think I end up moving my tank. Yeah, I actually end up moving my tank to pressure this left flank. Obviously, they can attack again, but it won't kill this unit, and it will actually just end up with their infantry getting sacrificed, so it'd be kind of pointless. But it is weakening my central position to kind of hold this right side. But it is kind of protecting my properties down here, and obviously I still need to hold this city. So I did have to keep the tank in a similar position. Just, you know, moving up my infantry into this wall in the middle again, threatening more properties on the left. I start moving to the far left. This is out of the copter's range. I do end up dropping this city for a turn, like my threaten on it, and they do have an infantry to go for it, but I think it kind of wants to stay neutral. Yeah, I do end up dropping my hold on it for this turn because I just can't do anything about this copter's range at this point. I'll just end up losing infantry for free. You know, I could move my anti-air up, but they're not really threatening too much, I think. I do end up building my own B-copter now with an infantry. I think I did move my anti-air. Okay, I actually moved my anti-air centrally. Yeah, that's why. I wanted to move my anti-air centrally. I was wondering why, yeah, there's two units on the same square. So that's why I felt the need to move my infantry to the left. I could have put my anti-air on the left, but I felt more threatened by this copter's central position and maybe it trying to break a wall down here, like break through my infantry, as opposed to it just picking up these left infantry. So I ended up moving my anti-air centrally instead to kind of cover all these units from copter fire. So I had to move my infantry to the far left to kind of stay out of the copter's range. Infantry does end up pulling back because of my tank threat. I'm going to get this property in the next turn. The mech does start moving down on this right front to kind of hold the tank, but I'm not really close enough that it's enough of a threat on me, really, you know? Infantry has to pull back because of the tank positioning. Still capturing these leftmost properties. Doesn't go for this capture because, yeah, the other thing about this position is I have a 2-hit pressure on this city now, which will obviously highly damage this infantry and come up with a really beneficial trade for me, especially because this infantry doesn't want to move because it's capturing. One of their tanks peels off to the left here, doing a similar play to my right side right now. Trying to threaten my infantry on the left. And they start kind of pivoting, you know, they got this infantry wall, but their vehicles are starting to pivot kind of towards the left side. You know, tanks are here, copters over here, artillery's holding back, another copter, another infantry, and they got a tank earlier. And so I kind of see this kind of left side pivot. I have a free hit on this infantry anyway. Even though it moved back, I'm still within range. So I just go ahead and hit this infantry, pick it off. I get the kill anyway. So even going here was really good. I guess they should have just gone for the attack, honestly, because there's no way to save this infantry. Like, even though they built a tank here, it doesn't actually save this infantry at all. And I still get the pick off. So I get the first kill in this game. Finish capture a property on the bottom left. Start capturing this property. Move my copter up into the center as well, having a similar threat. And at this point, I kind of see the armor pivoting to the left. So I kind of figured I could try and wing maybe kind of an attack on the right here, because the army's kind of in an awkward spot to kind of like walk over here, I felt. I started just kind of moving my units around and I go for an aggressive capture of this city. It's definitely, I think, a bit coin flip. But I am 3 tanks kind of to 2, at least in this extremely central area. This tank is kind of stuck on the left now. So it's not immediately going to be able to join this fight. I did see that I have kind of a 3 tank to 2 advantage. Obviously this tank can come, but it's not in range of anything yet. So I figured, you know, especially with the copter as well, I could maybe, and I already have anti-air, right, to cover this copter, so I kind of have a little bit of an army advantage, I felt, as long as this artillery isn't in a solid position to get damage. So I thought I could kind of go for like a bit of a cheeky aggression, and maybe just find some like solid trades, even though it is a bit closer to like their reinforcement, you know, I just kind of posture for something aggressive and just kind of see where it goes. Just because I feel like this current army state of like 3 tanks anti-air copter is a bit stronger than 2 tanks artillery copter in this specific lineup. And the infantry are even, so I felt a little bit confident like pushing into this bit a bit. So I just go for this capture, see where it goes, see if I can force any like errors or getting good trades. I move my infantry kind of into better defensive positions. This tank is obviously a big threat. I can't really do much about that right on this turn, and I didn't want to go aggressive and just throw my units away for nothing. Even though I guess I could have pushed into this city still. It might have been better in hindsight. I was kind of thinking maybe I could have pushed into the city regardless. Because both the copter and the tank actually don't threaten these squares. Obviously I can't hit the infantry, but I could have sat on the city maybe and started capping it just to apply pressure. And then still built the tank and moved up. But I think it's just I'm gonna end up losing more units that way, so I end up pulling back, building a tank, just kind of get to cover. Obviously, I'm gonna take a hit probably from this tank, but at the same time, I'm attacking this right front, right? So this tank doesn't necessarily want to sit here wasting time whacking these infantry when it might have to join this fight. So you know, either way, I'm feeling pretty fine about it. Move my other infantry up, get the double tank build, juicy. Not as good as the fabled triple tank build, but you know, I'll take it, I'll take it. So my opponent's next turn, they go for the capture of this top right property, top left. They start capturing the city that was threatening before. They do actually go for tank attacks on this infantry, get a big chunk, puts it down to 3. End up going for the counterplay on this infantry. Now 2 von Bolt infantry attacks, even with Com Tower, don't have a... I don't know if they can kill this infantry, to be honest, on the city, but if they can, it's a very low chance. So they don't get the pick. The mech pulls back to the center, which feels kind of bad because this tank is still just threatening all these infantry on the right. The artillery comes over, does lock this city, so I obviously can't cap it next turn. One tank comes over here to cover my tank on the right from hitting all these infantry. The infantry kind of peel back anyway. And the whole army ends up moving over into this defensive position trying to cover this one infantry. B-Copter does move down. Again, threatening all my infantry on the left. So there's 2 vehicles kind of threatening over here. A little bit scary. Ends up going to mirror my cap. Kind of seeing a window to try and threaten my own cities. And yeah, it looks like my gamble did not pay off that well. I did end up... You kind of have to like judge, what did I win here? I ended up making their whole army kind of move over here. Like, whole army is super condensed in this one section now. Everything else is kind of a bit more spread out and sporadic. A lot of their forces are kind of in this one area. You can kind of say the same about me, but you know, I have a tank here, I have a tank here. I guess I just feel like, you know, I have some options, whereas, you know, everything of their side is very condensed in this right area, especially. But I wouldn't call it a huge win. They do build a second artillery. Like I said, 2 artillery is a lot easier to manage than 1. Another tank comes out. This time it was actually a choice. They had 15k funding, so they actually chose to build the second artillery here, which I think is kind of interesting. But I think it's mostly because, like, it seems like the fight is going to be about this kind of city area. And you can kind of get an artillery, like, you know, over here, around here, these kind of areas. And apply some pressure. Start capping this next city, finish my bottom right cap. And then, what I actually see here is I realized that these tanks, after shuffling the whole way, have actually kind of like, they're kind of stuck. Because of the way the terrain is, they've got these forests here, that kind of prohibits them from getting over to this left side. So, you know, I said like, what did I win? It was making him move his army over here, making them move their army over here, but what they didn't recognize is that I kind of actually end up having these free attacks on these infantry. So I've actually ended up, you know, accidentally opening up windows. There we go, my tank didn't move. Opening up windows. Okay, it should be on 3 HP, but you know. One of these times, the replay will do the right thing. Here we go. Okay, well, this infantry's on 3 HP. We also... Oh, there we go. Okay, there we go. Infantry's on 3 HP. I start peeling my army back. But now I kind of have this pivot where I kind of got like an even trade. I moved my anti-air over here to cover this tank, of course. And I threatened this B-Copter as well. Move my infantry into the line, move this one into the city. Probably gonna end up falling to the tank, you know, if they pressure the attack. But they might feel I actually end up moving my own attack. So now this infantry is safe as well. If they move for this attack, I'll obviously get over here, hit the back, either, you know, on the city if they go for the woods, or, you know, just on the plains. So I end up covering that infantry, end up saving its life, build another anti-air. Because, you know, I think it's just, you know, this is one of those situations where it's kind of awkward to hold the copters down, I think. If I end up, like, I move my anti-air to the left, the whole army's over here. If they start pressuring him from the right, and they still have a copter over here, I won't be able to answer both, you know? So I just recognized that this anti-air is going to get 2 split. I build a second one to kind of cover this left side, protect this tank as it pushes up. And then I can use this one to maintain the right side if they do try to move in. Move my other tank up. Start moving my infantry up, get an attack to interrupt this capture. And then I pivot my copter to the left as well. So I've actually kind of like cycled my whole army to the left side. And then suddenly, you know, their whole army is over here and they have nothing to hit. Like they move their whole army, this entire reposition, you know, getting back into this defensive formation, having the artillery set up. And the worst thing about artillery is that they're slower than tanks, which means they're so hard to move and set up because they move 1 square slower. And obviously you want them to be next to your tanks at all times as like kind of like a wall. So this is also kind of a punish on this kind of heavy artillery build, where the artillery they struggle to like reposition again. You know, suddenly I've shifted the whole fight, which was just about this section. Suddenly every one of my units almost has moved over to this left section. And the artillery are all kind of stuck over here, like, guys, I thought the fight was here. And they have, you know, they have no idea what's going on, and it's so hard for them to keep up with this kind of rotating board. Build another B-copter as well, just to kind of help hold this right side. They have no anti-air yet, so the only thing I have to worry about for copters is other copters. And it's quite easy to keep copters out of range, and even when I have my own anti-air, sometimes I don't even have to. Keep this infantry wall in the middle. This tank did move back, but we didn't see it. Replay bug. Yeah, pretty happy with this turn. Just kind of re-pivoted my army. Got some good attacks on this left infantry. This tank attack is completely free. None of these tanks can reach it. This copter could reach it, but it's covered by the anti-air. Same here, you know, I guess there could be a double attack with copters, but then I get a copter back with my anti-air, and then, you know, I have kind of an air advantage at that point. And yeah, I also hit with the other copter. So the tank and the anti-air and the copter are covering my tank here for the copter attacks, and neither of these tanks can reach just because of the terrain and how far they push to the right to kind of hold this position with the artillery. So I was pretty happy with the way I pivoted this fight. You know, I pressure this left side. It doesn't really give me much, but it does open up the, you know, I pressure this right side, sorry. It doesn't reward me with much, but it does open up this kind of like left. It does expose this left side when all the units move here to clump, you know, expecting an attack on this right. So let's see how my opponent reacts. They do go for this cap. Finally, they're capping this city in the mountains. Pretty behind on that one, but happens. The copter does move on to the mountains to protect from my infantry attack. Their infantry end up peeling back. More infantry coming forwards. The artillery start pushing on the right. And the infantry pushing on the right. Once again going for this city. Trying to get an arty lock on this city so they can actually threaten it. Pretty smart stuff, I'd say. Tank is obviously one outside of my tank's movement range. Can't threaten it because of the forests. Moving up, picking off my 1 HP infantry. Just kind of moving their army forwards. But you see how slow it moved, and it's because of these artillery in the center. Like, obviously they want to protect their artillery, but it just slows down their whole army movement. You know, these tanks don't really have anywhere to go that isn't under threat from a double hit. You know, they can't really posture aggressively, so they kind of have to stay back here. And they just got this massive clump of units on the right. They can't really go anywhere. So my next turn, move this anti-air up, and then pick up this unit. Once again, I just see a great attack opening. You know, I have this move up here, pick up this infantry, and then none of these tanks are in range to punish my anti-air, and this copter is within 2 squares of it. So suddenly this copter is under massive threat, this infantry is under a lot of threat, and the other thing is I have my anti-air 1 move away from the enemy airport. This is a crazy advantage in any map, honestly. If you can ever get an anti-air within 6 squares of the enemy airport, suddenly they just can't build any units on it. The airport is literally a dead square, because if you put a copter, I mean, obviously they can have defensive units like tanks, or they can have a tank ready to counter hit, but if I get my artillery somewhere, you know, where I can just instantly take down the copter and I can have other units to back it up, I'm just gaining 9,000 funds every turn. You just can't build a copter, you know, you lose it instantly. So being able to like set up an aggressive position on this airport is always, or just any airport in general with an anti-air, is always a great position to be in. I end up going for this cap. Could have finished this unit, but I should have gone for the aggressive cap. Not sure this is the right play, honestly. I think I'm just trying to force my opponent into kind of like weird positions. I end up taking the kill on this infantry. It does kind of suck because it's putting things into artillery range. I feel like I have a bad problem personally, honestly, of where I don't 100% respect artillery range all the time. But at the same time, I don't think he wants to just be whacking infantry that aren't really doing anything. I think at this point, I've kind of like recognized that I'm already in it after this attack, and I'm like, whatever, I'll just leave all my infantry in there. One of them's going to get hit, it happens. And I end up kind of clumping my units, protecting my tanks with kind of this infantry wall, so obviously none of the first strikes can get in. This is my, yeah, okay, the infantry picks up this other infantry, it's 3 HP as well. Move my tank up to hold this city, and it's like the same thing, you know, normally, this copter would be quite threatening in this location with this tank in combination, but now I have this anti-air here, you know, if this copter goes to attack this tank, I just move my anti-air up next turn, and I'm on a city, you know, so I'm restoring. And then I have a, you know, a lot of threat. I have this copter coming up as well, I think. And then you know, suddenly this section is in a lot of danger, you know. I'm moving my infantry forward aggressively again. I'm feeling confident about this area. I block off with my infantry here, so the copters took a long way, I guess. And I end up putting this other anti-air here as well. Because this one is covering all of my tanks. I kept all of my tanks within this anti-air's range as well. Something I forgot to mention. And also this infantry is within range of this anti-air. So it has throttled this copter. It can't hit any of these significant units here. It can only hit infantry, which is, you know, it sucks, but wasting copter attacks on infantry is generally something you're pretty fine with. Put this anti-air here to cover the tank as well. And I also have this, you know, aggressive anti-air position. Suddenly this copter is pretty pinned. It can only really run to kind of like, it can run over this mountain range and it can run to these top left squares, but it has to run. It doesn't have any aggressive moves it can make. I think I capped this bottom right property. Oh, and yeah, my copter built from last turn. I end up moving on to this city. Which I see as an immediate answer that just prevents all of this aggression. None of these units hit copters effectively, only the anti-air does, or its own copter, or another copter, and suddenly, you know, just sitting my copter on the city just completely shuts down this play. And I think this was really big for my tempo as well, because obviously my opponent is setting up a lot of units here. They got the artillery, you know, they got this tank, they're setting up all these units to go for this siege on the city, trying to pick up a property. I put a copter on there, and then they're like, oh, yeah, I can't do anything about that. So that's what, you know, building the copter here, then running it straight into the city just completely shuts out all of that aggression. I position my tank aggressively on this city to kind of threaten this artillery. Now they have to kind of like wall it again. And obviously they can't hit into the city. Have my other copter here covering these units as well. Have another tank covering these units as well, hovering this city as well in case they can try to go for a cap. Oops. And then I move my infantry up, build another tank, build another B copter. So I'm feeling really confident about my air game at this point. They have one anti-air, but it's in a really awkward spot. And like I mentioned, this base actually kind of struggles to reinforce the center. Obviously, at this position, it's a bit more convenient, but it's harder for this anti-air to kind of get over here or get over here. And I kind of have a B-copter almost on this left side. So it's a little bit harder for it to reinforce over this side or get to this section that easily. And then also I'm pressuring this. Not only this move is also twofold, right? Because not only am I protecting the city, I'm also threatening all of these units. None of these units can deal with a B copter well. And this anti-air, you know, is it going to cover this copter? Is it going to cover this copter? It's hard for it to get to the middle anyway. Like, you know, I figured I could just build another one and just keep my air pressure up. Build another infantry. Opponent's next turn. They finally capped this city. It feels like it's been a million years. Artillery hit comes in on this front infantry. Picked off by the other infantry. And they start moving tanks up to kind of threaten, the, you know, stopping this cap. Stop the cap, as they say. Pick up this infantry. Tank moves onto this one. They do get a free first strike on my tank. Doesn't feel that good. They end up attacking more of my infantry. I wasn't too confident in this central position, but I feel like I was happy with some of my other locations. Like I said, B-Copter does have to run over the mountains. There's just nowhere else it could go. It doesn't have any other option. It has to flee. Infantry comes out. Artillery moves back. And like I said, they have to wall the artillery, preventing my tanks and copters from getting free hits. Building another infantry wall over here. Copter comes over here to cover these units in case my copter goes for an attack. Mech pulls back. Just kind of readjusting the wall. Put the anti-air kind of in a similar position as mine was before, where it's kind of covering this like corridor here. And you know, it covers most of the units, but it doesn't cover this tank, for example. So you know, I see here I have a 2-hit KO on this tank, copter tank. Yeah, doesn't quite cover everything, and that's kind of the issue I was saying. Like they want to move to the left and start threatening all of my pieces, right? All of my units. But this anti-air can't get to the fight. It's so awkward to reinforce from this base as opposed to this one. But they needed the anti-air to cover this right side as well for my copter. And this anti-air also isn't covering any of this right side. Obviously, they have the copter to cover it, but it's really hard for it to actually join the fight in a significant way. Build another tank, and then it goes into my turn. This is where the game's definitely going to start blowing open, you know. Move my infantry up to kind of like try to start to finish off this infantry. I need to get out of the way anyway, so I can get this 2-hit KO. Copter tank into tank. I move my furthest tank up, so I have more, you know, frontline tanks to play with. Pull this one back, finish off the infantry, start getting it repaired as well. It's a frontline city, so it's not too big of a deal. I can actually get this 2-hit KO, I think. I'm pretty confident in it, because it was 9 HP, and both my tanks were full. And then I end up just going for the capture again in his face. You know, this is the thing about when I talked about attacking with the tent in other video, you know, my other video. Here I'm still trying to pressure this city, you know, and every turn resources have to be committed to hitting this infantry, you know, and normally it's bigger resources than their own infantry. So, you know, last turn this infantry bought tank attacks. Now it was frontlining as a wall anyway, so it's probably going to buy tank attacks anyway. But, you know, it's forcing attacks, either from the reinforced tank, you know, or this tank, you know, something's got to hit it, or else I'm just coming up ahead of the economy game, and we're just, you know, trading vehicles for nothing at that point. Copter moves up here, obviously it's safer for the mountain range, but it is threatening a lot of these units again. I move out of once again, the artillery is now just pretty useless. I can only hit this 6 HP infantry, and it kind of wants to move to get into position, you know, and this is kind of like, you know, what I recognize. Once all of these units were balled over here, especially with artillery, it's much harder for the army to pivot when it has to wait for this kind of like artillery to move to be strong. Move by the tank up to reinforce. At this point, this tank is again not in range, so I just start picking off infantry with this anti-air. Move my infantry over the mountains, start capping the city finally. It's gonna be mine, I promise you. Move my other anti-air up to cover more of these units from the copter. Once again, this copter's in threat, but I'm probably not gonna go for this attack, obviously, because it's pretty deep. Bit of an overextend, but it is a threat anyway. So I'm moving my infantry up again to threaten these cities. This tank kind of has to stay here now to cover this ground, but it can't move off the city, or else it's gonna take a big, you know, first turn hit from my tank. So definitely a scary situation, but the tank is kind of locked into this location, protecting these properties. I end up building copter tank infantry again. I think it was the same as my last build. And it's just, you know, it's kind of just for the same reasons. You know, I just want to keep reinforcing these armies. I'm pretty happy with the way my attacks are going. I'm up a lot in unit count, mainly just from mostly infantry pickoffs. I've got a lot of like smart pivot infantry kills this game, I think, just in the way my units have rotated, kind of punishing these artillery builds, like I said. And I'm kind of ahead in unit value as well, as a result, even though we're the same economy. My opponent's turn coming up. Like I mentioned, they have to attack this infantry. This is a double tank attack, and it's going into an infantry slot because they don't want to drop the economy game. And I'm not saying it's an incorrect move from my opponent. That makes sense. But, you know, that's a really sad attack, by the way. Living on 1 HP here is pretty sad. Just Von Bolt things, I guess. But, you know, it does feel really bad to have to blow 2 of your tank attacks and you're just hitting an infantry, you know? Mech is moving up. Finally, the mech has almost reached the fight. Not quite, but it's getting close. Their infantry does peel back to start harassing mine, trying to prevent these this threat on these cities. I am going to end up getting this city, it looks like, unless they go for another aggressive attack, but they're just going to end up losing this infantry for free. Once again, they're going for this kind of like arty lock attack on this city, but the thing about this city now is now that I have my airport online, it's within a copter's move. I can just keep repeating that same play of moving my copter on the city, and none of the infantry can threaten it. They'll try to repeat this position. They do have a copter covering now, but I can just do the same defensive maneuver. They are trying to like build on this right flank, trying to kind of match my pressure on the left, but they're using so many more units kind of than I am to kind of set this up. And once again, the artillery is making all the rotation kind of slow. Do a bit on the anti-air, and we see the medium tank drop. This is where you know that your opponent's feeling the pressure. Because, you know, they spent 24, you know, that could have been B-copter tank anti-air, but they're feeling really nervous about this center point, so that it's medium tank. It's medium tank because it's like, okay, this is getting dangerous. In 2 turns, I have to be able to hold this. I'm dropping a medium tank. So we immediately see the medium tank dropping here, and you know, I think a lot of players, they panic when they see a medium tank. They're like, oh my goodness, a medium tank, I have to build my own or something. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of the times when you see a medium tank, you should be pretty happy, because this normally means you're winning, to be honest. Which sounds weird, but unless you're really getting crushed, so they're like snowballing and building medium tanks. Nobody who's winning really wants to build medium tanks that often, unless it's just like they're really trying to close out the game, or they're teching up really aggressively or anything like this. Normally it's the people that are losing that build medium tanks out of necessity. They're more of a necessity unit than they are a like a winning unit. So you know, normally when you see a medium tank, you should probably be cheering, and I definitely was pretty happy to see it, because it's just a lot of units, you know, it's a lot of income wasted onto one unit instead of like it being like anti-air tank battlecopter. Obviously a battlecopter isn't an option here because of my pin kind of I have with my anti-air here. Like I said, by the way, what I said earlier did end up coming to pass, where I got my anti-air in this position and suddenly I'm threatening this airport, and this airport is locked. So building B-copters here isn't an option. So I guess, you know, a medium tank is the best purchase that my opponent could make with the funding that they had anyway. But you know, it is a result of kind of my positioning on the map, and the lock I have on this airport is forcing this medium tank by, and it's just kind of an inefficient unit that's still going to struggle to get to the fight. It can't even get there next turn. It won't get there till the turn after. So I'm you know, I'm just happy to see this kind of unit being dropped. Infantry moves back, copter moving forward, reinforcing. Going on to my next day. I finished capturing this property. It put me ahead of the property game. Obviously, I gained 1k. My opponent loses 1k. Now I'm 2k up a turn. And then I move up an infantry. Oh, I almost got the next turn. That would have been scary. Oh, it happened. No. All right. And then I move up an infantry, actually threatening to cap this airport. Now it's getting really annoying, I think, for my opponent, because not only can I not build a unit here because my anti-air is in range, now I'm actually threatening to capture their own airport. And obviously, if I have this airport, I could just start dropping like bombers and stuff literally right next to their HQ, and it'd be really frustrating. Move my infantry over here, attack this infantry back. Just trying to threaten. I'm being careful not to put anything next to this tank, because the only way this tank can attack right now is if it attacks from the city. So I don't want to give it any openings to hit from the city, because that's the only way it can get any value. If I'm not placing my units next to the city right now, this tank actually can't do anything, because it doesn't want to move off, because my tank's covering all those locations. So what I am doing is being very careful not to give this tank an opening. Don't want to put any units next to it. Just want to keep it here where it's just 7,000 funds just being wasted. I end up going for the double hit with double copter on this tank. Oh, I did it again. Get me out. Alright, I end up going for the double hit with the double copter on this tank. Pretty reasonable chance of 2-hit KO, I think, if not guaranteed. Trying to pick up the 2-hit KO. Obviously, this artillery is not a threat as well. Can counter with their copter, but this anti-air is not in range, and obviously if the copter goes in, I'll just return 2-hit KO the copter next turn. So I actually had a 2-hit KO opportunity here. End up moving my next copter up. Now I've got 3 copters covering this location to 1. This anti-air isn't even in range yet. They only have 1 tank, which means that they can't really threaten my tank, so the anti-air can't even move that far up, and this artillery is again getting no value, and I have another B copter covering the city, so they can't even fight for the city that they want to fight for. I also started capping over here. Not really defendable for my opponent as well. The copter can't defend, it will just get double coptered. Tank can't defend, it will get tank coptered. So this looks like another free city, once again, winning in the economy over here. Just looking for opportunities to bolster kind of my economy advantage in the areas where I am winning. Even this middle part is looking a bit dangerous now. I do recognize my opponent has a pretty solid position here. Obviously the medium tank is coming in 2 days. At this point, I think this is a win, you know? I've pulled enough units into the center to make the sides weak enough, found these openings, you know, on the sides. I'm capping 2 cities over my opponent. At this point, you know, my mind is I have an economy advantage. I don't need to press anymore. Let's retreat and kind of hold position. So I actually just ended up pulling all my units back. I put this one on, you know, here to get repaired, kind of expecting it's going to die, but at the end of the day, they'll have to waste an attack to hit it. So I'm not too concerned about it. Just getting all my units on cities, trying to set up my wall again, getting ready to like kind of counter defend. This aggressive push from my opponent. At this point, I kind of recognize the game as my side is one over here. This side is like complete burning shambles for my opponent. This side, I feel like I'm really confident in as well. It's just my center is a little bit weaker now because they bolstered all of the units. They have this artillery set up, this kind of death ball. The medium tank's coming. In my mind, the game is going to come down to like a death push. You know, I'm building economy advantages on the right here. I'm going to get this city. I'm probably going to get this city in, you know, start capping it next turn. This city is practically guaranteed. Obviously, they can move like an infantry attack, but any attacks they take here will be very inefficient, right? Just because of the units I have and the posture I have. Over here, I'm threatening all these properties. You know, I've already picked up this one. There's airports in threat. This city could be in threat from this infantry. You know, it's just, at this point, I'm kind of building up enough of an economy lead just off getting these, like, contested properties slash my opponent's properties that, you know, they're going to be pushed back into kind of taking this kind of, like, this ultimate gambit of just ramboing units and trying to force my HQ where I'm a little bit weaker and forcing me to pull my units back. So that's kind of the way I see the game going. Building artillery is the standard counter to a medium tank. This is kind of one of the situations I will build an artillery is when I see the medium tanks coming, especially because I'm predicting this death push. That's why I'm pulling all my units back to hold this position. An artillery will obviously be very effective because they're going to be walking into me. So I'm kind of predicting this playstyle of them just funneling down the middle. Yeah, they go for this capture, trying to go even in the economy. Medium tank starts moving down, infantry's moving up. Like I said, going for this push in the middle. You know, I've just got so much pressure on the sides, they've kind of deemed it a lost cause. They're just going for this kind of like, you know, last gambit. They do end up going for this tank attack onto this infantry, try to protect this, prevent this airport capture, end up picking off an infantry with their final infantry in this location, but I still have, like, you know, 5 infantry here. 6, I guess, if you count this one. And yeah, everything from the sides is now moving into the middle, just completely giving up on this right side. You know, like I said, it's just too much. It's too much of a burning fire. You know, my opponent is just literally all-inning on this middle play because they feel like they don't have any other options just because of how many smaller fights I've won on the sides. So I'm gonna end up getting this city for free, this one as well. I can then move this guy up, start capturing all these cities. You know, I'm just gonna start pushing for an economy advantage. I start capturing all the cities back here. These will obviously be 3 turns, but I'll get them done. I'll go for the tank attack on this infantry because I can't get my tank to this unit anyway. I guess I could have maybe picked off this infantry and then maybe 2-hit KO the tank. But I think just getting a strong copter on their tank is enough anyway. Put it down to 6. I end up blocking, so I moved my anti-air here. It might get hit, but at this point, I'm already capping the airport and therefore blocking it, you know, with my unit's physical body. That I don't need this airport lock as much. I might take a bad trade here, but I'm kind of locking the tank from threatening this unit anymore. So while it is only a 3 HP infantry, it is kind of an inevitable capture, you know. They do have to think like this airport is also eventually going to be captured in 7 turns. So it's just like, or I can get a join up here, you know, in a couple turns, and then, you know, it's like 3-4 turns. Pull my tank back to start getting ready to defend. Because now this area is just completely free for me to just start capturing properties in, pulling my copters back. In defensive position, staying out of range of the anti-air. Moving my infantry into wall, keeping my anti-air in position. An interesting thing my opponent did actually that I noticed is they left this tank alive, which was 3 HP. So I actually ended up moving this tank up here. Just because I don't think it's very useful down here, and it probably would have died next turn just casually. So I end up using it up here to apply a little bit more pressure to this left side. Pulling all my tanks back to wall. At this point I just slam my own medium tank. I already have the artillery as a counter. And I just feel like I have enough funding to where, and once again, you know, I've kind of recognized the game state as my opponent's going for this death push, and if this death push doesn't work, I'm just going to win the game. So at this point, I'm just slamming a medium tank as just like, you know, I mentioned like this is the necessity build, and now it's a necessity for me because my opponent's going for this aggressive push. Their medium tank is coming. They've got all these units. I just feel like I'm going to slam my own medium tank because I think if I survive this, it's kind of a different form of necessity, right? My opponent slammed a medium tank because they're like, if I don't survive this, you know, I'm gonna lose. Whereas for me, it's like, if I survive this, I'm gonna win. So now I'm just slamming big units to be able to hold my doorstep, basically. Moving all my units around, keeping this wall up. They capture the city, so it does go back to 2018. It was 22-16 for a turn. They end up going for this capture, but obviously this is quite defendable for me, although it will require units to take care of. Anti-air comes in really aggressively. Obviously they have 2 anti-air, but this is obviously a very inefficient position for an anti-air, especially given that it's within a medium tank's range. But they're just picking off infantry and trying to get good trades so they can threaten my HQ. Just moving in, trying to hit as many units as they can. 2-hit KO my tank, even though it's on HQ. Move on to my HQ, really good defensive position. End up hitting my artillery. I think I made a mistake in my posturing here, giving them an opening like this. I probably just didn't see the whole line. But at the end of the day, I have a medium tank covering all these plays. So any of these moves are like under kind of a big threat. And the artillery isn't even able really to move into range yet. One thing to consider about these upcoming turns is definitely Von Bold's super. Didn't talk about it in the intro, but essentially it's a 2-range missile. So hits a square and, you know, 2 squares up, down, left, right, and then the corners. That does 3 damage and disables all of the units on the next turn. So my opponent's also playing into that kind of condition, obviously, because they want me to trade back in my units out of, you know, because I have to, and then they want to get a big Deus Ex Machina, and then I think it's called Ex Machina, and then disable my units and then just try and get a HQ capture. Moving all the units down. This big death ball sitting right at my base. Pretty scary stuff, honestly. I think at this point, I sent a message to them on Discord saying it's down to the wire, and they said they actually felt really threatened at this point. They kind of felt it was already over, and they were doing it out of, they felt like they had no chance. But I definitely still felt pretty scared. Like, I mean, you see all these units right at your base, you know, they get some good trades, pick off, and you get a good hit on the artillery that I kind of need to hold this medium tank, and I'm like, I don't know. They end up hitting this infantry, trying to slow down these captures where they can, just prohibit my economy, but I'm gonna get them all eventually. Move my medium tank up to hit this artillery, this anti-air. This one isn't really in position to you know, I can cover a lot of these other hits with other units if I need to, whereas this one is obviously a lot more threatening, so I just get a big smack on this anti-air. Move my tank over to pick it off. Finish capturing this property on the right. I'll do my caps. Should have done that earlier. Using my low HP tank to kind of like hit this infantry. Kind of sad I didn't get that KO. Had to use another infantry. Finish off that tank. Keep capping this airport. Another anti-air comes out, but it's really far. Like, at this point, the reinforcement is obviously in my favor because now we're fighting right at my base. I start moving this copter down to help with the situation because obviously I just need to survive this at this point, and then I'm pretty confident that I'll win just because of the economy situation on the rest of the map. I have a really big copter like line / advantage here, and I kind of just feel like if I whittle down enough of the army, I'm in a pretty solid spot. So I kind of just decide that, you know, I can sack 1 or 2 copters to the anti-air or other copters if I feel like it will whittle the army enough that I could just hold it with reinforcement. Because I just kind of need to survive these like opening, this kind of like opening attack, and then I constantly have units coming back, right, from my base. So get the 3-hit KO on this tank, get onto my HQ again, get a big hit on that tank, start moving my infantry over from the left. Moving my infantry over here just to start capturing these properties. I think I ended up giving this property in the end. I deem it's not super worth it, even though obviously I want to be playing the economy advantage. I've got so many properties, you know, springing up on the sides. I'm already 21 to 17 right now. This will just put it to 2018 again. I'll still be, you know, ahead of City. No, put it to 20 to 18? Yeah, 20 to 18. But I'll still be, you know, ahead 2 cities, and I'm feeling pretty good about it. Just drop another medium tank. Like, I mean, you know, like I said, we're fighting reinforcements on my side. It could have been 2 tanks, but, you know, I'm expecting a Machina to be coming. I kind of hit a lot into my opponent here. I'm just trying to set up a situation where I'll always have a medium tank to counter engage, because I feel like, you know, or worst case, I'll have a bunch of copters. I'm just trying to set up so I have a bunch of units here, and not all of them can get Machinaed. But I think maybe I could have played a bit better into the power. I actually had to go for just an aggressive attack on the infantry here, because I figure the main way I lose is if I get Machinaed and they get to like squeeze a HQ cap in and I can't defend it. So I was just thinking like, okay, maybe I'll just hit some infantry just to kind of limit the amount of options they have in that regard, because obviously only these 2 full HP infantry were within range of the HQ. So I figured if I hit at least 1, it might be harder for them to get in. I'm not sure that was the right move, but I guess that was just my mindset on that attack. So here comes the big doomsday. Ex Machina is prepped. They move in, finish this anti-air. Also, this anti-air had the benefit of blocking the medium tank as well. Obviously, they could have used like a tank and maybe copters to take it out, but the only real unit that had the opportunity to take it was the medium tank. So I kind of felt like blocking the medium tank's advance and forcing it to waste a hit on this turn on this anti-air was also quite beneficial for me. The tank moves around to actually hit this infantry. It was already low HP, so I guess it doesn't really matter. But a bit of a weird move, honestly, I think. But then the Ex Machina comes out, and then it hits all of my units here. So the missile hit here. You know, it was this kind of shape. Smacks all of my units. 2 of the copters survive, but they're probably both going to die this turn. But good news is, my other medium tank that I just built does make it, which was kind of my aim. I'm pretty sure I did move planner to check if it would live, and I was confident that one of them would make it out. But yeah. So my opponents are going for the aggressive attacks here. Obviously, they also now have this anti-air lock on my airport, so I can't put a copter anymore. Just start picking off units where they can, trying to get an advantage. Trying to make the most out of the Ex Machina. And what they do here is actually really clever. Obviously, my natural response to this scenario is to drop Ex Machina of my own. And obviously, they have a medium tank here and a bunch of expensive units. And I think the initial missile was like this, because it was the medium tank, the 2 copters. Von Bolt's super prioritizes the most expensive units it can, obviously. The most expensive, the most valuable location is where it shoots. So yeah, I think it was initially like this, kind of like 5 with the mech here. But my opponent builds another medium tank and then stacks all these tanks and stuff on top of each other to limit my Ex Machina. I think it is a clever move. I think it's smart to kind of like limit my missile. The problem with it is it's really just it cuts off all the resources from these units. Suddenly they now can't get to the fight. These units can't get to this fight. This is kind of the rest of the push. All the reinforcements that were coming have kind of been forced to fall back to just stand on each other and tank a super. So it does kind of suck, I think, for my opponent a little bit. But I think it is a smart move either way to like stack the units and force the missile somewhere less beneficial, if I do choose to use it. So going on to my next turn. Obviously all these units aren't movable because of Ex Machina. I just keep capturing these properties on the sides, just really trying to push my, economy advantage. I actually get an attack with this copter on this tank. I'm not sure if they saw this line. You know, I kind of ended up pulling this copter back and it kind of came out of the side, but it was a 4 HP tank anyway, so not super significant. I think I did this by accident, or maybe I was just going... I think I was going for the 2-hit, maybe on this infantry, and I had to, like, sack this other one because it was in this position or something. Yeah, I think I did intentionally. Just limiting the infantry. Again, I just woke up and I hit the infantry because, I'm pretty sure I'm just going to slam another medium tank anyway, but I'm just trying to limit the HQ capture because without any infantry here, my opponent is just losing all the economy on the sides, right? I'm getting all these cities and stuff for free. There's no contest here. So obviously if I get far enough ahead of the economy game, I can just start slamming strong units and eventually I'll just win through having an advantage in money, right? That's kind of the win con I'm playing for, which is why I'm just playing to survive this section. Slam on the medium tank, the first few don't cut it, just keep slamming. I think there's definitely arguments for double tank instead or something, but I don't know. I'm just this medium tank's kind of scary still, and I just use this one to hit an infantry, so I'm gonna take a big first hit here. I'm just not sure. I was going to not use Ex Machina this turn, but then I kind of decide that actually I was going to use it, so it's kind of a mistake, I suppose, because I could have got the plus 10/10 that you get from using powers. So I definitely should have used it at the start if I was going to use it, but initially I was going to try and hold it, but then I decided that I could actually just like try and push for this airport cap. If I Ex Machina'd, I would then survive the tank hit, and then I would get this airport for sure. And I kind of felt like getting this airport was also kind of a win con for me at that point. So I decided to drop the Ex Machina anyway. I'm probably not going to get a more valuable one the turn after. Like, I feel like this turn is the deciding turn regardless. So I kind of felt like I wasn't going to get a better opportunity to use it necessarily where it mattered more. And I felt like getting this airport, surviving, this infantry surviving 2 more turns. One from these being unable to move and the next from not being able to be killed by the 7 HP tank. So I'll get this airport like guaranteed. I felt like that was enough value of the Ex Machina for me, but I definitely should have used it at the beginning of the turn if I was going to make that decision. Artillery here comes in, 2 damage. Copter comes in, try and finish off my copter. Doesn't actually get the knockout, which is pretty sad. Copter goes off a medium tank. This medium tank is going to drop, but it is now their medium tank has moved into my medium tank's line, so they do have to block this. Infantry moves up to finish this tank. Anti-air cycling around does free up my airport again. Not sure why this anti-air moved back here, to be honest. Maybe it was just, I guess it was just like the threat of the tanks, but it's not really doing anything over here. And it's kind of freed up the airport. At least this way I'd have to like dedicate attacks to it, but maybe it's more useful, just keeping it alive. Tanks are moving down the side now to try and hold these cities. But obviously I've already got infantry back here, capping these ones, and then my opponent decides to resign. The mech moved in here to defend. But, the board is in a pretty bad state. This push didn't work out. The infantry are all going to die. And yeah, I just have so much of an economy advantage now. I'm capping this city next turn, capping this in 2 turns, capping this city next turn. I'm going to be 23k to 15k in the next term. So I could build, 2 tanks B-copter every turn. At the very least. And my opponent can only build like 2 tanks. So I'm a B-copter ahead every turn. And then, yeah, this city, I'm not going to start cutting it, but this one and this port, so I have all of these top cities. Obviously, these units can start moving out, trying to defend it, but I'm just going to break this push, start moving all my units out, and then I'll just have so much of the map that it will be too hard for my opponent to come back normally, assuming everything plays out properly. So that's why they decided to resign. But yeah, it was a pretty interesting game. Felt like I was pretty happy with some of my pivots this game. I think like it showcased pretty well where you could punish artillery, kind of forcing them to move, around, basically. Just keep cycling my units kind of around this kind of U shape, and just forcing the artillery to keep repositioning was really preventing my opponent's army from getting any value. And I think it does showcase one of the weaknesses of artillery, where because they are slower, it is a lot harder to get them in these solid positions, especially on a map that doesn't necessarily support it super well, like if there's like very obvious artillery locations or arty-lock cities you can get, like it makes a lot more sense, but in this kind of like general scenario, the artillery just didn't get as much value as it probably could have, if I hadn't been pivoting so much. But yeah, I was pretty happy with the way, I feel like this initial attack, while maybe not the best, it did open up a lot of different aggressive scenarios that I could take in the long run. And kind of ended up with me winning the sides. So yeah, I think it was a pretty interesting game to observe. And look back on. Definitely some stuff maybe I would have done differently. I'm sure there's a lot of stuff my opponent would have done differently, but I feel like it's a pretty enjoyable game overall. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed the review. That'll be all from me. Thank you guys very much. If you did enjoy this video, please give it a like. Really helps out the channel. You can also consider subscribing for more Advanced Wars content. Like I said, 3 to 4 videos a week, hopefully. And yeah, thank you guys so much for checking this out. Really appreciate it. And I'll see you again next time. Have a good one.